There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
This episode of Recruiting Future Roundup is sponsored by Vonk. Vonk supports global enterprises worldwide to drive efficient hiring through AI-powered job distribution and recruitment intelligence. Vonk recently unveiled Echo, a new AI agent ecosystem designed to make overwhelmed TA teams and outdated funnels a thing of the past. Echo rebuilds the hiring process for speed, clarity, and fairness without losing human control. To find out more, you can go to vonk.com, and Vonk is spelled V-O-N-Q. Hi there, we are back, we are live, and it is Recruiting Future Roundup time. A little bit later in the month than normal, but there were holidays, there was Christmas, there was New Year, there were all kinds of things. But this is your live roundup of the December episodes on Recruiting Future. And once more, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Rhona. Rhona, how are you? And a belated Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I'm doing great. Starting the year off in a whirlwind like everyone else, I think. But it's been a week and it feels like it's been 5, but I'm enjoying it so far. Happy to be here.
Exactly. It kind of feels like it's been 5 weeks and also 5 days all at the same time. It's just a very strange world that we're currently living in. Just for people who may not have seen all of your great work before or listened to your amazing podcast, just give us a quick intro to you and what you do and talk about your podcast as well.
Sure. So I'm Rhona Pierce. I am a former recruiter and now personal branding and strategist. I help founders, especially in HR tech, with founder-led marketing and founder-led content. And I host a podcast called Workfluencer, where I talk to creators that are not influencers, but that actually have opinions, perspectives, and experience that they share. And they use content to build authority, whether it's inside their organizations or for their companies that they are building.
Absolutely. So make sure you check that podcast out because it is fantastic. So back to Roundup. If you've not watched Roundup before or listened to Roundup before, once a month, we look back at all the episodes that were published on Recruiting Future the previous month and just look into the big insights and the takeaways so you can make a decision as to whether you want to go back and listen to those episodes or even re-listen to those episodes if you listen to them the first time. So let's start with episode number 751, which is called The Trust Problem in Recruiting. And as Rhona knows, trust is something that I think is going to be such a big issue as we move through 2026. So this was an interview with Catherine Wiley, who's an experienced TA leader. And basically, this was about her experiences spending several months looking for her sort of current TA job. So we talked a lot about all the issues that job seekers have, and she obviously gave us the TA lens on that. Rhona, what stood out for you in this particular conversation?
I mean, really reiterating what we've known for years, that most of our recruiting problems are actually self-inflicted. We are obsessing over volume, AI applications, and ghosting. But like what Catherine made it really clear is that most of the damage happens before the role even goes live. Like people aren't clear on the jobs, the hiring intent isn't real, the process isn't thorough enough or like thought through enough. Like everything downstream is chaos. We've known this for years. We've talked about it for years, and still here we are.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because a lot of the narrative around the candidate experience at the moment is focused on AI's out there, candidates are using AI, the economy is not great in various geographies around the world, which means we're just getting way, way too many applications. But what was really interesting about this conversation was, do you know what? People are advertising too many jobs because there are jobs that don't turn into jobs. There are jobs with really uncertain requirements, things that aren't really thought through. And that's just adding to the problem. So she really talks about being much more intentional and holistic in looking at the jobs you're marketing and how you're marketing. And also, I think the other thing that came out for me here was this kind of mismatch of expectations, that employers are expecting candidates to behave in a certain way. They're expecting them to, really, really only apply if they really want that job and, give them all of their attention, but they're not giving that back. And it's a really unequal relationship. So really recommend listening to this one, because I think there's probably food for thought for everyone in there, and perhaps some angles that have not really been discussed much before. So I really, really, really enjoyed that particular conversation. The next episode, 752, using job architecture to drive value from AI. Now, I never have favorite episodes or favorite interviews, because that would just not be fair on everyone. However, this is one of my favorite interviews of last year. I genuinely learned a huge amount from this conversation. It was with Ben Zweig from Revelio Labs, if I can say the company name properly. And it was all about job architecture, but job architecture from a task perspective. So let me kind of explain quickly. The conversation was about AI and how AI is really potentially reshaping the workforce. However, in order to get the full productivity benefits from AI, you really need to understand the difference between jobs, skills, and tasks. Now, what's becoming clear, and Rhona, we've talked about this a lot before, is AI isn't automating jobs, it's automating tasks. So it's automating parts of people's jobs, not people's whole jobs. And what Ben was saying is, unless you have an architecture of what those tasks are, you can't make the right decisions about what AI is automating, what it's augmenting, and how it works. So you get to the position where companies are just laying off lots of people because of AI, but then they're finding that they're not getting productivity gains. I think companies are now starting to come out and say, well, actually, we got rid of too many people because AI isn't filling the gap. And a lot of it is because of this aspect of kind of workforce planning and interpretation. So it was a fascinating discussion. Rhona, what did you think?
I knew this would be an episode that you loved, because I know we've talked about this so many times, and also everything about job architecture and just like workforce planning is really something that I love and can geek out on for hours and hours. This episode really reframed a lot for me. Like, we talk endlessly about skills-based hiring, but Ben pushed the conversation somewhere like much more uncomfortable, but in a good way. Most companies don't actually understand the work itself, not at the task level. And if you don't understand the task, you can't really predict what AI will change, what gets automated, or how roles evolve. So what was really interesting for me was the idea that skills conversations are often a shortcut that lets organizations avoid the harder work of job architecture. I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had this language and this way of explaining it while I was in corporate.
Absolutely. And he was on the podcast because he's promoting his new book, which is about this. So really check that out. And I think the other great thing about the conversation is, rather than just sort of giving us a load of theory and, you should do this, he actually walked through how to do this using AI and LLMs. And, it's not for beginners. It was fairly complex in terms of how you do it, but very, very doable. And really illustrating that actually this way of working is within the reach of every single employer now, because AI can actually help do this at scale. If you can only listen to one episode out of the episodes that we're talking about, make sure it's this one. Sorry to everyone else, but it was a bit of a standout for me. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Again, familiar theme. So 753, hiring exceptional executive talent. Interview with Rhona Pierce, founder of Portfolio Rocket, and she is a career strategist for C-suite executives. And she really deals with very, very senior C-suite executives. And there were kind of two sort of parts to this conversation. We were talking a bit about re-educating people at that level about the current jobs market and how things have changed and how they can't just, phone up a load of executive search people and expect careers to land in their lap. That they need to do a lot of work. They need to have a real digital presence and reputation. But probably more interestingly for the people listening to this, we also talked about what employers are getting wrong with this type of talent. And it really mirrored a lot that we talked about in the conversation with Catherine in the earlier episode. But again, it was about trust and, partly about destroying that trust, but also, the issues with age bias and some of the filtering that happens in recruiting, really filtering out the best sort of top exec talent for organizations. So really interesting. Rhona, what did you make of this one?
Well, I was excited when I saw who the guest was. Lauren is someone that I've known on LinkedIn for many years. She absolutely knows what she's talking about when it comes to this. I've had the honor, I guess, of being invited to speak to some of her cohorts of coaching that she does, and it's top of the line executive. So everything she was saying is really coming from her having the conversations on the ground with the people. I think this is an amazing episode for anyone who's doing executive hiring. Really what struck me here was how differently executives assess opportunities compared to how companies think that they're hiring. She made it very clear that senior candidates aren't reacting to titles, perks, definitely not long processes. I know those days of, everyone understands if you want an executive role, it's this long process. No, that's not how people are evaluating. They're reacting to urgency, clarity, and whether the company actually knows what problem it's trying to solve. I think so many people have been burnt with going through these long processes, getting executive roles, and then getting into it. And it's like, ooh, your role, no one even knows what you do, why it's important. So people are asking those questions. And it's something that companies should really look hard when they're opening up these roles to make sure that you have these answers, because it's very, very embarrassing at that level to not be able to give those answers. And it's a deal breaker. People have options, even in an employer's market.
So we move on to episode 754, Finding Clarity in Recruiting Chaos. Now, this was an interview with Adam Godson, who is the CEO of Paradox, and principally he was revisiting his predictions that he made on the podcast the previous year. Interestingly, he didn't predict that Paradox would be acquired by Workday, but that was one of the things he didn't predict. But there's lots of really interesting revisiting of what he said within that conversation. Now, I love talking to Adam because I can just properly geek out about technology and TA. We almost went off on one about quantum computing at one point, but luckily for everyone listening, we decided to take that one offline. But lots of really interesting stuff in this conversation. What stood out for you in this rather geeky conversation, Rhona?
I mean, what I found most interesting wasn't so much the talk about agentic AI itself, which everyone's talking about, but how clearly Adam connected speed to candidate experience. Especially in frontline hiring, fewer applicants, faster decisions, and managers actually running the process alongside AI agents. It really challenges the assumption that everyone's had for years, that I've fought for years, that more applications is better. In this model, fewer applicants can actually mean better hiring. And that is something that I've always known. Lots of people have always known. I was just surprised and in a good way refreshed that someone who leads a company with I would say, leading tool in frontline hiring where it's high volume is talking about how fewer is better as far as applications. So that's really what stood out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love the way that the way think that. I really love the way that they think, and looking forward to seeing what happens in the coming year. And I think lastly, the other thing that we talked about, which I suppose is particularly applicable to them being acquired by Workday, but also Smart Recruiters being acquired by SAP, is the access to the kind of end-to-end employee data that they technically should have from talent acquisition all the way through to performance, to L&D, to talent management, to exit. And I'm really interested to see what those companies make of that and how it kind of really informs, some of the AI functionality that they have. So, definitely going to be keeping an eye on what happens there.
Same. That is something that we've been saying that we need for years, and we have these two big players in the space doing it and now having that access. So I'm excited to see where this goes and how that data is used.
So moving on to the next one, which is 755, balancing automation with authenticity. So interview with Mark Whitby, who is a fellow podcaster, really big podcast in the recruitment agency world, The Resilient Recruiter. And the weirdest thing is, I found out about sort of 3 weeks before we recorded this, that he lives just down the road from me. Now, I live quite near a big city, but I really live out in the country. So it was a very unexpected, but welcome coincidence to have another recruiting podcaster just living a few miles away from me. So really interesting conversation about agencies, how AI is working in agencies, the future of agencies, and also how they might kind of interface with TA. Rhona, I know this is a topic dear to your heart. What did you think of this one?
Yes, my recruiting ops heart was very happy for this episode. Automation isn't really what is killing trust. It's the careless automation. What really stood out to me in this AI saturated world, who the message comes from matters more than how clever or personalized it sounds. And if a candidate doesn't trust the sender, no amount of automation fixes that. The big takeaway for me was that automation should buy recruiters time to be human, not give them an excuse to disengage, which I think is a huge misconception that is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. He did a great job of sort of diving into all the stages of the recruitment process and how automation should work, and also what people are getting wrong for that. And I think it's applicable to, internal TA and agencies alike. I think the other interesting part for me was, again, about this taking the trust thing a little bit further. It comes up time and time again, doesn't it? Must be a theme. Taking the trust thing even further, because we were talking about the future of agencies, and, he strongly advocated that agencies should be specialized and really understand their sector and have the trust in that sector. And then from a TA perspective, they can help bridge that trust gap, because they can, introduce companies to candidates in a kind of a trusted environment. And obviously there are agencies that do that already, but there are many that don't. And we were sort of speculating on those that don't, perhaps didn't have, a very long future. So a really, really interesting conversation from lots of different aspects. But yeah, the automation and the authenticity thing was sort of great to do a deep dive into. So well worth a listen if that's a topic you want to explore further. So pretty much the last podcast of last year and December was 756, Trends That Matter. So interview with Susan De La Vega from Korn Ferry. And this, we went through Korn Ferry's latest TA trend research, which I think they've done every year for a number of years. Now, this came amid a flurry of prediction-led content. So prediction webinars, prediction newsletters. They still continue, actually. I'm still seeing people doing predictions for this year. And I have nothing against predictions. We had our own prediction show, didn't we? not so long ago. So I can't really complain. But I think that the key thing is there is a lot of noise out there. And most of the predictions that have come out in the last few weeks are based on people's opinion. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but opinions are often wrong or not based on, sound data. So what this is instead is it's basically trends analysis. So it's based on research and conversations with 1,600 global talent leaders. And it's pulling out the trends and analyzing them in a really sort of, sophisticated research way. And I think this is important because, the issue with noise and signal has been a big issue for a number of years. But I think this year is going to be particularly bad. I think there's going to be a lot of noise out there. And it's really important to try and identify, well, actually, what are the trends that matter? What is the real signal here? So, great conversation from that perspective. And we just went through some of the trends that they've spotted that they think are going to be sort of big in the coming year. A few things came up that we've already talked about. So mapping tasks came up as something that was important from the AI perspective. Also, a change in role for talent acquisition, being more strategic, having more influence within the company, not just looking at bringing talent into the organization, and a kind of a real sort of breakdown in the silos and the talent function. They were some of the areas that we discussed. Rhona, what stood out for you from this research?
A lot of what stood out for me from this episode, kind of like what you said, it was less prediction. It felt like how grounded the conversation felt. It was less prediction and opinions, and it was more like pattern recognition. And like the point that stuck with me around like the entry-level hiring and the pipeline risk. Everyone's running to cut early career roles. It might feel safe in the short term, but it really creates a long-term damage to the organization. And people aren't fully accounting for that yet. That's something that really stood out for me. And more broadly, this episode like reinforced that TA leaders who rely on tools alone are going to struggle. Strategy, being a realist, and like market literacy matter more than ever before, especially in this world of AI. Those were the things that really struck with me.
Yeah, likewise. And I think the junior roles part was really interesting because other than people talking about, oh, we're cutting junior roles, that's probably a really bad thing. People aren't really talking about this properly. And I think that it was a really sensible, interesting kind of insight from the research, because it was like, junior roles are being cut, whether that's for economic reasons or because of AI. We're not 100% sure, but there are definitely less entry-level roles in organizations than there were a year ago. What damage is that doing to the future leadership pipeline of the organization? And I think that was a kind of a key point that people really need to kind of think about and really kind of get back to the crux of what what's always sat behind entry level recruitment or whatever level that is. So a really kind of important point there. So that was December. We're already halfway through January, so there's some great interviews already up there. So I would urge you to follow Recruiting Future and listen to it as well, wherever you get your podcasts. This live will be published on the podcast in audio later on today. And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Rhona, for your insightful analysis as ever. And I'll be back next month. Thank you very much.
This is my show.